Hi everyone, what we're going to go over today is the fluid balance worksheet is what it is titled on the top. You were given this before we were done with school, so if you can please find that. It should be 3 different sheets of paper. You should have an information sheet on the front, and then you should have 2 of the actual records after that. They should be stapled together. Of course, you can go ahead and tear those apart because you are not going to want them stapled together while we are going through this. And what I have done here is I've got my information sheet. A couple of things I want you to notice about this. First of all, we've got 2 different time periods on here that we need to make sure that we are paying attention to. You have got a first shift, which is 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. up here, and all of the intake and outputs during that period of time. And then you also have the second shift, which is 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and all of the readings that happen during that time. So when I look at this record sheet here, and I know mine looks a little bit different than yours. I tried to print it on my own computer at home and it just sort of distorted it a little bit. But what you have here is each one of these stands for its own shift. So if you look up at the top, it says what today's date is, and whenever you fill this out, whenever you're doing this video, please put the date that you did it. And then also under shift, which I have up here, you can write in that in a couple different ways. You can write 7A to 3P if you want, or you can simply put first shift up at the top there. Either one is great. So let me explain why we use these bedside intake and output records. Sometimes people are eating in their rooms. Sometimes they are, of course, going to the bathroom in their own bathroom in their rooms, and we don't have a slip of paper. And so what they'll do is they'll take some of these bedside intake and output records, and they'll just tape this on the inside of the door, and then you can just very quickly write down what you need to do, and then we collect them at the end of the shift and then record them in the electronic medical records. So we are going to go ahead and go through this. What we've got here is you've got 2 boxes on each one of your sheets. The first one, go ahead and label with a date and 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. And then on the top of your page, you have this box over here, which is your intake, and then underneath that you have the output. Then we've got all these different categories underneath those. You've got the time that it happened, so the time that the person did some kind of an intake. You have a choice of doing oral intake, which means they took it by mouth. IV, sub-Q is like a different injection. And then we've got irrigation. Irrigating means I can irrigate or flush something. You can flush a wound, you can flush an NG tube, you can flush a feeding tube, you can flush a catheter. There's a lot of different things that I can push fluid through to kind of rinse it out or flush it out so the tubing is not plugged up. So what we have, we're putting fluid into the body and into that tube, so we have to count that as intake. And then we also have a miscellaneous category in case we have something that doesn't fit into one of those categories. Then we have our output. Our output, we have our time, we have a catheter, we've got void. Void means that they're going to the bathroom in a normal way, so they don't have any tubes or anything like that. They're just sitting down and able to urinate. Emesis is throw up. And then we have drainage. Drainage can be drainage from a lot of different things also. We talked earlier on the last video about different tubes that can be coming out of the body. It can be an NG tube. It can be a drain that has been put in after surgery. Anything with fluid in it that we need to measure the amount coming out of. And then we, of course, have this other miscellaneous category too in case something does not fit into one of those. So now that we've looked at what we have up here, we're going to start going through our sheet. So we're going to start right here at 7 a.m. And at 7:30 a.m., the person went to the bathroom, and it says urine here, and they had 400 cc's. Now, 400 cc's is equal to 450 cc's is the same thing as 450 milliliters. So 1 cc is the same thing as a milliliter. It's just labeled differently on my sheet here because we used to do everything in cc's, but now everything is measured in milliliters. So it's no big deal. We know it's milliliters. So we're going to take this, and the first thing we're going to do is figure out whether urine is intake and output. Well, we definitely don't drink urine, so we are going to put that in our output. We're going to do everything in military time because we want you guys to practice your military time. So this is a great time to practice that. So we're going to come over here to output, and we're going to go ahead and put in military time our time that we had this urine. So military time at 7:30 a.m. is 0730. And then it says we had a regular urine. Now urine can come out of a catheter, or we can void urine. If it was a catheter, it would actually be labeled as such. Okay, so on your sheet, we're going to assume the person does not have a catheter because it's not labeled that way. Obviously, in real life, if you emptied it out of a catheter, you would know it came out of a catheter. And we have 450 milliliters. So we're going to put that under void, 450. Now, I don't need to label this. The reason I don't need to label this is because it's assumed all of these measurements right here are going to be in milliliters. So we do not need to label milliliters on there. Now we're going to go on to the next reading. The next reading is at 8 o'clock, and we had orange juice, milk, and coffee, and different measurements for each one of those. So obviously those are going to be taken by mouth. So we're going to go over to our intake, and we're going to put in military time our 8 o'clock. So we're going to put 0800. And this is going to be under oral intake. We're taking it by mouth. And we're going to have 3 different readings here. We're actually going to separate all of these. So the first reading is the orange juice, and that is going to be 90 cc's. The next one is the milk, and that is 120 cc's. And then we have the coffee, which is 160 cc's, or milliliters. All right, and then we're done with that one. Now we're going to come over to the next one, which is 9:30 a.m. And this one, the person had water, and they had 500 milliliters. 180 milliliters of water. So because that's intake, we're going to come right back over here, and we're going to put 9:30. Now, if I were to write 9:30 right here, it would look like at 9:30 the person had 120 milliliters of fluid. So I need to move my times down. So I'm going to put 0930 down here underneath, so your reading is going to be straight across. So then I'm going to put 180. We're going to go through this whole thing just like, and just keep on going through the entire sheet here. So the next one is going to be the urine, and that's at 11:15 a.m. and we had a urine of 500 milliliters. So I'm going to write 11:15 and 500. And then the next thing is going to be the coffee. Coffee is intake. We also had soup. That's also intake, and that was at 11:30 a.m. So 11:30. We'll put 160 for the coffee. The soup is 180. And we can move on. The person vomited now. So at 11:30 they had something to eat. They had coffee and soup, and obviously that did not sit very well. So they vomited in 200 milliliters of vomit. So the next time frame is going to be 12:15 in military time. That is just 12:15 because our next hour that we're going to come to is going to be 1300 in military time. So that makes sense. I don't want to subtract 12 from this because we need to be between 12 and 13, 12 o'clock p.m. and 1 o'clock p.m. So we've got 12:15 and the person vomited. So the person vomited, which means I need to look at a different category. Vomit is going to be under the emesis. The person vomited 200, so I'm going to write a 200 in there, and now that one is recorded. Next one, we had water at 1:15. Now is when military time starts to get a little trickier because we're going past 12 o'clock p.m. So 1:15 p.m., we're going to keep our minutes the same, but we're going to add 12 to the 1. So it's going to be 13:15 is my military time for 1:15. The person had water and they had 90 milliliters. Next up, we've got 2 o'clock p.m. and we've got 7-Up at 120 milliliters. So we're going to go ahead and add 12 to the 2. So that is going to be 1400, and the 7-Up was 120. At 2:15, the person urinated 350 cc's. So over on my output, I'm going to write 14, 15, and under urine, I'm going to have 350. The last thing I have is going to be at 12:45, and the person has blood drainage. Drainage means it's coming out of the body, and they had 150 cc's. So at 2:45 p.m. would be 14:45. They had 150 milliliters of drainage. All right, now that we have all of our readings on here, we're going to add things up. You'll see we've got a totals category here, and we also have a totals category down there. The first thing you need to do is add up all of our categories straight down. So obviously IV, we did not have anything, so you're going to put a 0 there. 0 under sub-Q, 0 under irrigate, 0 under miscellaneous. And then we're going to add all of those things up. So you can go ahead and do that on your own. I didn't add this ahead of time, so I don't want to take the time to do that. Then we have over here our totals. We've got the catheter, we've got our void. Emesis is going to be the 200, and then 150, and then 0 under miscellaneous. And then you guys can go ahead and add that other one up over there. Then you're going to add all of these categories together to give you your total intake for that shift and your total output for that shift. So now that we've gone through the first one of these, I would like you guys to go ahead and do the 3 to 11 shift 1 on your own. Please make sure that you are labeling your sheet up at the top. I want you to make sure you put your date in there that you did it, the shift that you had, so it's going to say 3 to 11 shift or second shift, and then I want you to go through down here and I want you to fill in all of these things, and then I want you to turn that in. I do want you to turn in the first shift one and the second shift one so I can just look it over, see if you're having any difficulty. And you can either scan this or you can take a picture of them and then turn them into Classroom. If you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.